Good evening, everybody. My name is Chelsea Lester, and I'm the exhibition manager at Philadelphia's Magic Gardens. I created this exhibition with these two lovely people called We're on the Move. They're gonna take you through the show, tell you about the pieces, what inspired them, what inspired their materials, which is one of my favorite parts about the exhibition. Just a little background. I usually don't do this, but I want to talk about how we know each other. So me and Ashanté Khari all met at Chautauqua Institute for Residency in 2019.
Right.
And I got to work alongside them and see how brilliant they both are as artists and also how kind they are as human beings. So I'm so excited to have them. This exhibition explores play, community, freedom, and so many different beautiful ways. So I'm gonna pass it off to the both of them.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Actually, give Chelsea another hand.
Exactly.
Another hand. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. Where you so far? Bring it in. Bring it in.
Me? I don't want to block
this is a two-person show.
Oh my God. I don't want to block your views.
Oh no, you good. Are we on camera?
Mm-hmm.
Is this my good side? Yes. Oh my gosh. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for coming to Philly Magic Garden for our show, me and Ashanté's show. We're on the move. There's so much to talk about. I'm so excited to talk about it. You're so excited to talk about it.
Yes.
Do you want to go first?
I can. I'll start.
All right, let's go. Ashanté, I'll go first.
We'll start on this side, actually. And I'll start with this piece and kind of talk a bit more on the earlier end, and everything will make sense as y'all get to the work in the back.
Oh, hold on. Before we start.
Yeah.
We're on the move. The title.
Yes,
the title. So the title is from a song. What is the name of the song?
I'm gonna actually. Everybody knows the song. Yeah.
Okay, amazing.
It's like you literally. "We're on the Move" is not even the title of it.
Yeah, it's not.
But you look it up and it comes up.
Yeah. So when we were creating this show, or we're thinking about the pieces that we were gonna put in the show and like the making of the show, we really wanted to be. Or for the show to have a connection to Philadelphia as a whole, this building as a whole, mosaics as a whole, kind of a couple different things, and then connected back to our own original practice. And so in thinking about that, our titles usually have some connection to either like history, poetry, or music. Philadelphia is huge on music, a long history of music. And so we were like, okay, definitely what songs were inspired by Philadelphia, were created in Philadelphia? What are the things that we want to bring to the community in one way or another? And how do we do that? And in researching and thinking about, what the show could be titled and what do we want to bring or what type of energy we wanted to bring, we came across this song.
Yeah, Ain't No Stopping Us Now. Yeah, as a McFadden and Whitehead. Yeah, it's just like a upbeat, really. Oh, okay. Well, I don't,
Yeah.
So this is like the vibe.
Right.
Just like
I know, right?
really, yeah.
Who's the artist?
McFadden and Whitehead. So it's like an older song, but just like nostalgic. You think about when there were like no worries, but like.
The cookout.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
No copyrights for.
Cut the scene.
But yeah, kind of. I think even with like coming up with the title, like what we make work about, us speaking about ourselves, like this community, and even like the spirit that song holds, and like Ain't No Stopping Us Now, like. It's always kind of like it's only the beginning kind of mind frame. And with my works, starting, like, I'll talk a little bit about titling. I think I'm gonna like just talk about works overlapping, but with titling, my titles always come from music, heavily inspired by music. And that's usually where my titles come from. So Till the Very Second I'm Gone is like a line from Busta Rhymes and Janet Jackson song. Just because I'm heavily influenced by Hype Williams, who was a director that was really famous in the 90s. Like if you were a musician or an artist, you had to have a music video done by Hype Williams. And those visuals, like Afrofuturistic, otherworldly, and seeing like Black people in these like otherworldly spaces existing in these other ways always caught my eye as a child. And then like Your Dream is Just a Touch Away. That's from a song called Let's Celebrate, which really like inspired a big body of work that I did previous to coming here. But it's sort of like the same vibe of the Ain't No Stopping Us Now song. Just like things that just make you feel really good and like place you in this place of like, yeah, like no worries. And then Float on Air is titled after the song Believe in Yourself from The Wiz. So there's like a Diana Ross version and then there's a Lena Horne version. Either or, huh? Don't make me choose. Oh, exactly. I'm like both. But it's like, believe you can float on air. And then I think about like when I'm titling my work, me speaking to myself, but also me speaking to the people that I make work about, and also me speaking to my audience. And sort of like this way of like, you're gonna read the title cards, and my hope is in like some way, like if you read Your Dream is Just a Touch Away, like you leave my piece, like, and that's in your head, and you believe that whatever your dream is, like, it's just a touch away. And then speaking about like, I guess my work overall, so my work started initially with just a single hairstyle, finger waves, and kind of grew into me wanting to be more inclusive because I make work about like Black bodies and Black people and their hair and the histories of our hair, and me being aware and doing a lot of research with like hair science, and we carry multiple textures in our hair, and really wanting to bring those into the work to start to grow the abstraction. So now incorporating multiple textures into the work. I have a full set of like symbols that I utilize to kind of tie together multiple textures, and now the inclusion of objects. So for example, this piece was made prior to my visit to the Magic Gardens. These two came after my visit, especially this one. And so now, with us like really being intentional about when we're making work in the location that it's in, and me coming in here and visiting, and immediately like I just had this urge to, I'm like, I need to make something now. But then also sort of like a conviction of, I haven't been doing enough, I can do more, like don't limit myself. And so that's kind of what this space really brought into my work, is really me just pulling out objects that really hold meaning, whether it's in relationship to hair, there's crystals in the work, and all types of things that have really like come into the work through the inspiration of this space. But I'll stop there for now and turn to you.
Switching over to me, this is my piece right here, and this show is really about a lot of different aspects of how we combine all the things that we were talking about earlier. And so the one of the biggest things that I thought about in general was like, what is my connection to Philadelphia? How much do I know about Philadelphia? And what is my interest in Philadelphia that also connects to a lot of different places? And so basketball, riding bicycles or bicycles is like part of your childhood. Different slang words or euphemisms that are used in Philly, and a little bit about like what people think about in terms of self-care and how do they care for themselves. And so again, basketball is also one of those big things, and Philadelphia and basketball has a long history with the 76ers and so many different people that have come through basketball in Philadelphia, especially Allen Iverson, who as a kid was like a superstar to me. It was like, AI had everything. And so, and thinking about that, this piece I made prior to the show, and a couple of these are made prior to the show, but a lot of these were also inspired by the space and Philadelphia. But this one was particular in terms of like the connection of basketball to my history and basketball to this place. And so this is representation called Hoop Dreams. And where I grew up at, it was a lot of different ways to get caught in a system of jail or prison or anything like that. And one of the ways to get out of that was learning how to be really good at basketball or becoming really good at music in one way or another. And so like to stay away from prison, you had to figure out a way to make that work for you. And so like Hoop Dreams was always a part of my identity, because I have a lot of family members who end up going to jail, but before they went to jail, they really tried to be good at basketball. And so like, a little bit more about my work, and so this texture, so all of this here, all of that, like this space is water from different locations with either history personally to me or history to Black history in one way or another. And so in this, the water from the first location, slave ships arrived to the United States. The last location, slave ships arrived to the United States. The river Harriet Tubman used to free people. Every single Great Lake, the Mississippi and Ohio River, and then also river from Senegal and West Africa are all used and combined in different ways with ink. Which obviously ink has its own history. Like being able to write down your name on something means you have ownership of it. So ink really meant something. And so including that, the ink basically tells a story of the water. So the water and ink is combined, and then the ink follows water throughout the piece and travels. And as I introduce fresh water and salt water and combine them, it creates a whole new space. And so the story becomes its own thing. So a lot of my paintings, I don't have control over a lot of how it looks. The ink has its own mind, its own body, and I'll kind of work with it. And so that's how a lot of these other paintings you'll see in this same texture will be when you look at that black and this kind of veininess. And this like terrain, it's always due to water. And because I talk about water and I talk about people, and everybody is made up of 60 to 70% of water or more percent of water, all of these paintings are also then made up of 60 to 70% of water as well. And then because I'm talking about water, wood and sand. And so this is African mahogany. And it just calls back to basketball courts. Basketball courts made of wood, and so I wanted to add some type of wood element to the piece and bring it all together. And so this is one piece in here, but the next room has a bunch of other stuff. So let's go.
So for this piece, it was a combination of two different bodies of works called Innumerable Blessings and Countless Felicitations. And it also came from The Wiz. I'll just say like the movie The Wiz is like a humongous inspiration to my practice, and upon like my first visit here, this space immediately like kind of transported me there. And like those two titles, it was from Miss One. She was one of like the good witches, but she was really into numbers. But then taking those, that was her greeting, but then like thinking about that greeting and thinking about wishing like innumerable blessings and countless felicitations upon the bodies of the people that I make work about, just felt really heavy to me. And I was like, I need to use those for titles. But for these pieces especially, and within like this installation, I've been thinking a lot about like the macro versus the micro, and like how I use the circular canvases to reference the body. But then with these, I'm more so thinking about like maybe bird eye view or like a map view, and starting to think about these like hair textures as like landscapes. And so it always kind of like makes me think about your work and how like you see like within his work, they look like rivers like on a map. I don't know, it's fun for me to like find connections between our works, just because we work so separately, but then there's always this overlap. But then also with this, another huge emphasis on bringing in multiple textures, and with the focus on like 4C texture hair, which is a really coarse texture of hair, and how beautiful I feel it is, and the stigma that has been placed upon like that texture of hair. But also with doing like a lot of like research within hair science, and like coming to the realization that hair is actually like the most delicate. And so this kind of like, I don't know, I guess kind of like calling upon the beauty of this hair texture that has kind of been seen negatively and kind of bringing that into my work. Also kind of like bringing more color and yeah, I'll stop there because I'll start to ramble. I get really into my work. I'm gonna let you go.
You're so silly. Well, let's walk over here. So I don't know who all knows Philadelphia history, but in Philadelphia, there's a place here called the Johnson House. And the Johnson House was connected to the Underground Railroad. And so people came through the Johnson House to seek freedom from slavery or being enslaved. And so in the Johnson House, they had a place where they would keep everyone, and it was in the attic. And so this piece is a conversation around the Johnson House attic. And what does that space represent? Like, obviously it's an attic, so it's dusty and it's decrepit, or right now it's, maybe not in the best shape possible, but essentially that place was a sign of freedom. Like, if you made it from Mississippi to the Johnson House, you are deep in the north. You're close to getting out of, everything that you've been dealing with, or every place that you've been dealing with. And so the Johnson House represents kind of a magical place to think of yourself on the other side of freedom and getting there in one way or another. Again, I said that the work holds water from the rivers that Harriet Tubman used. And so there's a lot of references to freedom without ever saying like, oh, this is an image of freedom. And so in this one, I also have like a lot of weird ideas. Like I think that they sound normal in my head, and then I say them out loud, I'm like, that's kind of weird. And so in this one, I was thinking about, okay, what represents freedom? And I'm like, youth, being a child, like children are the future. So the future is included in that freedom. So then these two children came. There's a lot of history in Philadelphia of cowboys as well, like people who ride horses. And so I was like, okay, I want them to ride an animal. And then I was like, okay, what animal would they ride? Because I wouldn't want it to be a horse. And so this animal here is based off octopi, which is hilarious because Kevin Hart, who is not from Philadelphia, grew up in Philadelphia, does a comedy bit about an animal he calls a deer bruck. And it's a deer and a zebra. And if you look at an octopi, which I heard is in the Philly Zoo, yes, there's one at the zoo. It looks like a deer from the top and then like zebra bottoms. Like if a deer put on zebra pants, it was like, that's what the animal looks like. And so in this instance, I was like, what is this? And I saw an octopi, and I was like, okay, that's really an interesting animal to be like, have deer, have zebra, even though it's actually it's like a giraffe extended, like it's a part of a giraffe. Like I don't know, but that animal is also from South Africa. And in South Africa, when English people came to the land and heard about this animal, they called it an African unicorn. So to think about like a unicorn being like a magical creature, this space being called the Magic Garden, and these two children as signs of freedom riding a unicorn, and as the unicorn walks into a space, birds of paradise flowers came up from the feet. And so like everything about this is magical. Like if you're in a place where like the only thing that you're thinking about is getting out and getting the freedom, and then these two kids with kind of a light as a future come up to you on a African unicorn that as it steps creates flowers. Like it just made sense to me. That also sounds crazy when I say it out loud, but like it just made sense. And so in doing that, everything kind of came together. So the Johnson attic was a thing that's such a magical place, and the future of that magic is the children. And the children, are a big part of that. And so that's how this piece happened. And then with that came this. And these are all from a different not documentary, but it was a video informing on different parts that were really integral to Philadelphia in terms of like the community and the black community. And one was Mother Bethel Church, which has fantastic stained glass windows. I also went to an AME church from where I'm home in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It was called St. Mark's AME Church. And so knowing of a AME church here that is very historical, I was like, okay, I gotta connect those things together. And so Mother Bethel has like 4 big stained glass windows that are really interesting, and one of them has this symbol on it, and then there's like a ray of light coming from it. And then there's another one that has like this kind of background or bottom part that are really interested, but a different top. So I combined both of them to kind of create my own stained glass window, but inspired by the Mother Bethel stained glass windows. And then if you can't tell, there's people all over the place with multiple arms in this place. There's so many multiple arm people, and I was like, I gotta bring that back. And so I brought that back here with the 4-arm figure in front of the stained glass window and a kind of prayer-esque, like hands in the air. You know, when somebody really feels the spirit, they always like, their hands are up. So in the middle, in like the thinking of that, I wanted this person to kind of put their arms up. And I'm saying person, but this could also be like 2 people. Sometimes it is 2 people. And that brings it all together. Oh, again, I work with ocean water. So like this texture is sand. There's sand there. And like the one before, African mahogany. So the sand is just a callback to add something in terms of like being a painter to the image, as well as like adding a space for this person to be in. Anyway, last one over here. So again, I was talking about basketball, bikes, self-care, freedom, historical connections to the space and the land here, the different buildings that came about because of migration and whatnot. And so that was a lot of that. And over here is about self-care and thinking about, you know, what does it make, or what parts of me and the embodiment of the space are really important. And so this one was about, it's called Black Man Self-Care. And it's this idea of the things that you do to take care of yourself, specifically as a black man, because I'm making the pieces. And so clean shoes, nice jewelry, and like a way to make your hair look as good as possible was like the most important things growing up. It was like, if you're cool at school, you had nice shoes, you had, you know, maybe some jewelry or like a chain or maybe, you know, something a little blingy, and then, you know, had nice hair. And usually the nice shoes and nice hair works for everybody, but it was a different way of thinking about it. And again, it's the same motif of all these different waters and skin, and thinking about the body as water, and the body is also history, and all of the water that's on this earth now is the same water that's always been on this earth. So you have millions of years of history in connection to what water I'm using just to make these paintings. And obviously the water isn't on the painting, so they evaporate. So again, it continues the cycle of water into the world, back to the earth, and so on. And so thinking about self-care and thinking about, you know, the body, again, sand, prayer hands, cleaning your shoes, gold grills, and, you know, do-rags. And so like, yeah, it was, a lot of this just makes sense to me. Again, like if I'm looking at the image, it's kind of weird because it's like 3 people on top of each other with different spaces and sizes, but it just feels all the same. And there's like a set of hands here, but then another small hand here with this toothbrush and then the shoe. I don't know. A lot of artists don't act like they want to tell you that they don't know. Sometimes they just don't know. It just felt right. And I will tell you, I'm an artist that does stuff and I'm like, it just feels right. And so like this felt perfect. And one way or another, and just to let this be as it is, and to let the drops of water kind of, you know, pool however they pool. Again, I let myself not have a lot of control over this. Like I can get to a point where I can make this edge happen, but essentially all of this, like, and how that dries and how that looks is up to the water. Because I make paintings while I don't make paintings. So I'll put it on the floor, I'll do all the water, and I'll drop a couple extra drops, and then I'll walk away, and then I'll come back, add a couple more drops, and then I'll just leave for the day, and then come back in the next morning and go, what happened that night when I was in here? And then that. So yeah, which is great, because the thing about it is water flows its easiest path. So as long as I make a water line, or I don't break the line of water here, I can do that, and the water will still kind of go wherever it wants to. And that's why water will go like this instead of straight. Like somehow the water underneath, or the ground underneath, makes it so that it's easier for water to flow like this than it is to go straight, until it gets to the point where the curve comes too close, and then the water decides straight. But anyway, last little bits, Ashanté.
I was thinking, like with the installation of this piece, and I remember talking to Chelsea about like how it was gonna be installed, and I just specifically remember I was like, I just need it like right there. And then like if you like look at the floor, and me specifically remembering like the story of how like this floor was together and him with his friend, and you could tell which pieces his friend made versus the pieces that he put down. And I just really, with making all the work, I feel like we both have really just wanted to kind of like be in conversation and with the artist that made this beautiful space also.
Yeah.
And so like this portion of the floor especially, and then being in conversation with this, I was like, I just need that to happen. Yeah, and so then this was just like another piece that came from that set also.
All right, and so just to bring it across this wall, this one is called Bull. And so in Philly, there's a word, it's bull. You spell it either B-U-L, B-O-U-L. It just means it's like a person, like that's bull. So you can say any person is bull. And so I thought about the word like bull in terms of, you know, if I made it the actual like B-U-L-L, what is a bull mean? And so this whole piece is a conversation around the slang word bull that is used in Philadelphia, but then also like the representation of what is a bull, what is being or growing up in poverty. Like, do you feel like the bull? Do you feel like the matador in that situation? Are you just chasing something because you're angry? Like in poverty, there's so much anger because of, you know, not being in a certain space or not being in a certain place you want to be, and like always feeling like you're moving but not anywhere that can get you out of something. And so in thinking about that, I thought about the word, like what does it mean? How did I feel about growing up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which has the same type of stigma to it, where like there's a lot of segregation, but essentially also, you know, bull is a slang word for like a person, basically. And so I thought about the head of the bull, but then what's underneath that? Like, and then the African mask came. And so this African mask is made from African mahogany. The sand here, different textured sand. So this is like a really thick sand, and this is more coarse sand. I then took the nose from the mask and did it like a realistic nose and lips, even though it's all usually wood. And then I did underneath that another face. So it was like bull as in slang for, you know, a person. Then it was like, well, what was before the bull? And it was like a connection to African history, or coming from West Africa. So underneath the bull is the African mask, and underneath that mask is then the person. And who is the person? Like essentially you're the same person you've always been, but there's so many different layers of history to who you are. In the same way that there's so many different stories I can tell about water and people who've died in water or who've lived through the journey through that water, but I'm here now as who I am. And so again, there's this connection to the nose ring, which some people call a bull ring, and then the actual bull with a bull ring. And thinking again back to like unveiling or unmasking of oneself. So like you're not bull, you're not African mask, you are who you are. And so there's a lot of different layers to thinking about what that word means, how do you connect it back, and then also just like feeling it out. This is a lot of just like texture. I really wanted to do a bull head on top of a person, and so it was like a really a group of ideas that I was kind of working from and thinking about and pulling from. And then, yeah. And then, it's also like, I do like things in oil that I think are interesting or important. So like the nose and the lips always happen in the work. There are no eyes because essentially I'm not looking for you to look at a painting and see if it looks back at you. I want you to feel the painting through the body of water, and as you being a body of water connecting to the painting through water, not through like, am I looking at the painting? Is it looking at me? Doesn't matter. The water is what connects us. And so even in the animal, like the animal doesn't have an eye, but again, it's made of water. So essentially, yeah.
So for this piece, Way Up High Looking Over, it was also titled after the song Let's Celebrate, which another of the pieces up front were also named after. And so for this piece, I feel like my work has kind of gone literally kind of like into outer space. So I feel like that's kind of where I've been at and thinking about the things that have been inspiring me lately. So a lot of the inspiration within this piece comes from the character Hippolyta from Lovecraft Country, and specifically the episode where she names herself. And I did a little bit of research about like Hippolyta, who is just a Greek figure, and realizing that Hippolyta is usually a side character, and then like nobody knows anything about Hippolyta. Hippolyta is always there to support whoever's the most important person. And then thinking about the character of Hippolyta within Lovecraft Country and her becoming the main character, and not only becoming the main character, but having the power to like jump universes and name herself, and then returning to childhood and like the joys of childhood and how easy it was for us to just, I want to be this thing, or I want to be this thing, or I don't have to choose anything. Like I asked my niece, I'm like, what's your favorite color? She was like, the rainbow. And I was like, I like that. And just kind of wanting to tap back into this feeling of, I don't have to settle on this one thing, or I can do both. And coming into this piece, like there's so much going on in this work, from the different circular forms and how they do represent bodies, but then they start to represent like planets. And so then you kind of like are stuck, like how big are these circles actually? And even like the crystals that start to happen and the energies that come through crystals. And yeah, I just kind of went crazy. Even like the matte versus the gloss within the work, and how I've always thought about like the color black, and how I think about black as an accumulation of all things. And then also about blackness as like there's no one way to exist within blackness, and we all are black people with these individual existences coming together to create the identity of blackness. But yeah, I just really wanted to like go far out with this piece, and because I'm pretty much in outer space all the time now, and I've been really wanting to be intentional about tapping into joy, because I mean it's been scientifically proven that trauma is passed on genetically, and I'm like, if that's been passed on, I refuse to believe like joy and any other types of like positive emotions also aren't passed on. So I've really been intentional about trying to tap into those things, and sometimes they come out like this. I'm pretty much just like in my Peter Pan stage right now, and this is like a physical manifestation of that. So yeah.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. But so yeah, bringing it to the last piece, and the last kind of idea, So this piece is called Bike Life, which is funny because Chelsea helped me make this piece. Oh. I was in my studio working on it, and I got to a point where I was like, had this and like this and maybe like a couple other things, and this space here where now it's a sunset was blank, And I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do with that space. I don't know what's gonna go on with it. And Chelsea was like, do a sunset. And I was like, what? A lot of my work has blues and greens in it and all those other colors. Usually it does not have very many reds or oranges because I'm working with water, and what color is water, guys? So I was like,
that's why I said the sunset.
Yeah. So just was like, make a sun. You don't do work with orange like that. So make a sunset. Yeah, it was like, do a sunset. Like I can paint all the way. So like if I wanted to, I could just paint a sunset. So I was like, all right, paint a sunset. And like being able to paint is great because then I can just do whatever I want if I decide to do it. But then it also allows me to make the abstracts more meaningful because then it's very, very specific on like, I wanted this to be here because if I didn't, I would have just painted however I wanted to. And so, thanks, Chelsea. But this piece is again about bikes. Bikes are so important, and bikes are universal to the point where bikes were made. Like once you have a bike as a child, like it gave you the opportunity to go everywhere, and it also gave you the opportunity to do so much more because if you're at a friend's house and you all need to go do something or go to another friend's house, you all just get on your bikes and you would just go. And nobody could stop you except for the sun. If it went down, you got to go home. So bikes were a huge part. And in Philadelphia, bikes are gigantic. There's a whole community of bikes doing tricks on bikes, riding down the street on bikes, being in the middle of the street for no reason on bikes. It's just bikes are everywhere. And bikes are just, one of those things where once you had a bike, it was a whole different thing. And also like learning to ride a bike is also a huge part of growing up. It's like once you learn how to ride a bike, your world opens up crazy, which is funny because I did not learn how to ride a bike until I was like 13, I'm pretty sure. But then as soon as I learned how to ride a bike, I immediately started doing tricks on bikes. It was like as soon as I got past the fear of falling off without training wheels, I immediately started just trying to stand on top of my seat and just let my bike go down the street. And so again, this piece is about bikes, but it's also about community. It's about friendship. It's about identity in one way or another. And then kind of a mix. Again, like my ideas are kind of weird because I do stuff that just feels right. And so I started off with this orange bike. I made this green bike, and then I was like, let me add flowers to this. Well, now I'm gonna add flowers to the shirt. I really like this shirt here, but I wanted something to break up these sunsets, so I just made a red streak going across. And then I thought about the American flag in one way or another, so this giant blue star happened, and then these stripes happened. And it's like waving a flag, and as if you were a flag, so like your body is that wave. So that's what that red stripe was. And bringing it back to just like being a painter. So these are kind of painterly marks. Like I didn't really have a specific reason other than the way that I liked it to look that I added this, but it just felt right to make it that way. The same with all of these, and like making the in between the spokes a different color than the ground, making the shadow of the bikes a different color than just black, and then adding tassels and different things. But again, the skin is the same. All of this is still made with water. All of this is still made with ocean water. They have on clothes, but everything is still the same. Like the body is still the body, and the space is still magical. Because this can't happen in real life. Like your shadows can't have a green and pink aura around it, and you won't have a sunset that just hits the ground and then continues going. But that was the point. Like everything is supposed to be magic in one way or another. It doesn't have to make sense as long as it feels good. And so this is what a lot of my work is, especially for this show. Is like, to think about this space in general, and like him looking at this walls and going, yeah, I'm a mosaic the ceiling. Like that is like not a lot of us will go, but like that's the point of this place. Like you can't get it anywhere else because not too many people think to mosaic an entire building, let alone neighborhoods. And so I wanted to, I had that feeling in the same way of, making these pieces. Like, it didn't make sense all the way, but like, it felt like that's exactly what it's supposed to be. Is that a good ending?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, any questions y'all have, just, raise your hand. We'll pick you out and then go from there.
Oh, here she is.
So with your paintings, water is super important.
Yep.
And not just any water.
Yeah.
It's water from very specific places.
Yeah.
So if I came and I didn't read the signs, or if I came and I read the signs, but I didn't know that it was water from this, the river that Harriet Tubman.
Yeah.
I mean, if I didn't know exactly about the water and where it came from, would I have a lesser experience or a different experience?
I like to think of my work as like a 1-2 punch kind of thing. So the first thing and the most important thing about my work is I have, I think if my mother and my grandmother saw my art, would they be able to enjoy it and would they be interested in it? Because, not everybody's an art aficionado, or there's just some things that are like very out there that is like, no, some people aren't just gonna get unless you like read a 100,000-page book and then like, what is this about? So the first thing is always like interest is my biggest thing. Is the image interesting to look at? And then usually what happens is, if it is, people find out that next part, which is where the water is from. Because if I can get you to stand in front of a piece and look at it long enough that you like want to know what it's called, then you look and you see the title and then the materials, and then you get ocean water, lake water, river water, and you're like, what water is that? And so usually what's happened is, and what I've learned is that people who look and are more interested in the work find that out, and then they get a deeper understanding, and it makes the work better for them. However, I always at least want you to get to that first part where you're interested in the image. So again, it can, because once you know those things, it becomes a little bit more interesting, because now you know there's a place that this is connected to. But essentially, at the end of the day, all of this is like, I like this is because it's a really nice image or a really nice painting. And so, I never had it where anybody's like learned the information and going like, no, I don't like it anymore. so I've been pretty good. So like if you don't know it, you don't know it. But if you do know it, it opens up the painting a lot.
First of all, thank you both for the talk. I really appreciate it.
Cool. Thank you for coming.
Super, super dope to see your works in person. For your works in particular, something that I first noticed, I was looking at some of the pieces that I was talking to Alexandria about, like the barrettes and the beads that you would use, and that's like, when I view that, that's something very familiar, and it automatically takes me back to this very specific place and location and time. So it almost feels like this stylistic kind of work, but also creating it in a space that's very, like you're world building in a sense. And then also hearing your references to this, like a cross and all this other stuff. My friend did this thesis about the Black utopia and imagining. And it's kind of the sense of, and tying that into the idea of semantics, in terms of like using your body and physicality to, in a sense of healing. In a sense of healing in the state of trauma. That connection to like world building and creating your own utopia through these abstract forms and like, something very familiar that's very tangible. Something that I really appreciate. And there was a quote that I jotted down that you mentioned when you asked your niece what's your favorite color, the rainbow. And I felt like that kind of encompassed that, concept in a way. And I also sensed that, especially from the last piece that you presented, when you mentioned that, you can't get that in real life, blue shadows with green bites and such. But in a sense, in a painting, you can. You can do whatever you want. So in a sense, you're building this like environment and like world that is very immersive when you do both of your pieces, but also very much tied to a Black experience that's not one linear, and it can be expressed in very different forms and very like on a visual level too. but something that is very interconnected that we don't really understand all the time.
Yeah.
So that's something, I just wanted to make that comment.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No,
Yes.
sure. I think that there's like a lot of different aspects to making art that are imaginable in a sense. Like you can't create something specifically that is realistic in a painting and then have everybody believe it if you just decide that you want to make it an imagination, like an imaginated thing. Like Chelsea actually has a painting where it's in bathtub. Chelsea used to do paintings in bathtubs, and you would look at them and then the hands were all red, and you didn't understand why they were red, but you were like, yeah, your hands are red. Yeah. What are you talking about? They're supposed to be that color. And you never question it. You're like, is that blood? No, okay, they're red. Yeah. So like that's just like I feel like painting is great for that. Or sculpture sometimes too.
Mm-hmm. I do have a question. Do you have like a particular connection to, like, since you reference urban imagery in both of your works, is that just like something that called to you? Is that the personal connection? Is it representational? Is it intended to be easily recognizable? So yeah, I just...
As far as the work?
Yeah.
For me, I've come to a place where I know that some people are going to immediately know what it is, but I'm also equally okay if people don't make that reference, because what I have learned when I make space for not being so, I need you to see what I see, and once I step back and just like let it go and to start to hear other viewers, sometimes I would just kind of like stand back, and if people don't know that I'm the artist and just listen to like what they see in the work, it's allowed me to make new connections within my work and things that I have not tied to Black people and our hair, and that just conceptually explodes my work even more. So now I'm at a point where I say yes and no. Like some people will get it and they'll have one experience with it, and then some people won't get it and they'll have an equally important experience. Hopefully that answer makes sense, because I'm always like yes and no.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, and if anybody didn't hear the comment, it was about references and urban references. And so just in motifs of the work, like thinking about the do-rag or a gold chain or the bike, I don't think so. I think that, there's a lot of things that are universal, but I also think that the most important things is to create just a sense of community in one way or another, which is funny because like nostalgia is like super important. Like if you some paintings sell just because of nostalgia. So like, creating like elements that call back to something that either you remember or there's a universal memory, are just like points of the work that make it just a little bit better. Which is funny because like you think about the Mandela effect and you're like, that's fake, but like everybody feels like they remember it. But yeah, any other questions? Got anything more? Oh, man, what's going on?
Forgive me for my tardiness.
Don't worry. I'm just glad you got you on the other side from the glass.
Shout out to bro.
I was like, how are you gonna get in?
I DM'd you, but like, just ignore it. Well, like, forgive me for my ignorance. Have you two presented work together before as a common occurrence? If not, were you satisfied with how the full experience was? Do you feel like your works complement each other in a way? Do you feel like it's successful in that sense? If you have done it before, and this happens all the time, then just ignore the question.
No, okay.
It's a good question.
Yes, this is our third time exhibiting together.
No, it's actually like our fifth.
What are you
6.
counting?
If you're talking about,
Are we counting undergrad?
if we call them 2-person show, this is our third, like just me and her. But we've also done like multiple group shows where we've been like next to each other. We've done one with Chelsea. We've done multiple at school. We did one with Amani. So this is like our 7th time like being in the same space.
Yeah.
A
lot.
Dang. But this is our 3rd like time being just us two in the same space. Go ahead, see what you say.
I'm like, we're together, like art partners and relationship wise. So we've been together since undergrad. So we met like sharing studio space. And now our studios are 2 hours apart. But for me, it's always funny to like, I'll see his work. And a lot of times, like sometimes, like for some of these pieces in this show is the first time I saw him in person, but to always like see that overlap come through, whether it's texturally, and as far as like the satisfaction with the curation of this show, like I feel like Chelsea has known us so long and like was there in like the early parts of our flourishing love and our
careers.
So I feel like Chelsea, like, knew exactly what to do, where to put everything. Just because we've always had like a personal like friendship relationship with each other, and I always like showing worth with Khari, because it's always funny. I just always like when people are like, do y'all know each other? And then that's why I was like smiling so hard when you were asking. I was like, wait, because you're not the only person in here that probably doesn't know that. And then we dropped the bomb and they're like, and then it's like, now I have to look at the whole show over again and see like what other overlaps accidentally are coming through in the work, because we don't work in the same space anymore. But I think that's just one of those like universe things where it's like a connection even like miles away. Yeah.
No, it's kind of interesting because at the beginning, I think our work actually looked more like at the beginning than it does now. Now it's starting to get a little bit like separated in one way or another. It's always been like pretty separate because she does more abstract and I do like figurative work. But there's a lot of motions, like even in the sand where there's like a lot of like this happening. And she used to do more like, her intentions were like a representation of waves, like people's waves. And so like her doing waves and me doing water, like there was always gonna be like a right next to each other. And yeah, we started off in 2019 with studios pretty much, or 2017, 2018 with studios right next to each other.
In
undergrad. And then 2019, I went to New York to go to Columbia. She went to Connecticut to go to UConn. And pretty much we've been separated the whole time, but we still share and like look at each other's work constantly and critique each other. And so there's always like things like, because she was working with this idea of hair and waves and this like space of, you know, here, and me thinking about water and ocean waves and all these things, there's always going to be like little backs and forth. But now, now it seems like you add more material and me kind of going off in a crazy water tangent, things start to like slightly pull away, but at the same time, there's still a bunch of stuff that's like together. So like our first show was pretty close to each other. Our first show was in Nashville.
Oh yeah.
Our second show was in Michigan at a school that saw the show in Nashville, and then Chelsea is just the bomb, and so I was just like, I want y'all in the show together. And I was like, all right, and so we did this one, and I think it was just like the way we talked about history. And it was like the amount of influence outside of just like our ideas, because the first show was pretty much just all our ideas. We didn't care about the fact that it was in Nashville. She is from Tennessee.
Yeah.
I went to school in Tennessee. That's where we met. And so it was just Nashville. But but this show had a lot of different like references to Philadelphia, like different places in Philadelphia, different ways of thinking. So it's a little bit more separate than before. But yeah.
Anybody?
I just want to say, I
really appreciated, Ashanté, hearing more of the background story behind your pieces. I am going to get on people's nerves talking about it. Especially with the Hippolyta piece, and that was like one of the powerful parts of Lovecraft for me. I really enjoyed the journey, and honestly, when I look at this, I see a constellation behind you. So this has been really wonderful.
Yes.
Nice.
I'm glad that's coming through.
I just have to ask how many times it took you to get that configuration of
It was one. So me and Chelsea were kind of going back and forth. And I was like just telling Chelsea, like prior to this, with me making these pieces initially, I wanted them to be together like this, but instead they were like installed in a different way. And I knew like with Chelsea and like one in these, I knew like this would be like the perfect opportunity. When we kind of like had them one way, but I mean with technology, I just cut them out and, well, so I'm like, maybe it wasn't one. I only sent one through. I don't know. Because I mean, they kind of, really it was just kind of like the flow of like the color. But with the textures, they flow into each other. And even sometimes I've lined up pieces that are more like waves and they line up also, which freaks me out as like a happy accident. But it's also kind of like, I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to do. But I think I just really, I don't know, there's just something about how these kind of like, how vast it is. And in the same ways that I'm thinking about like the vastness of like outer space. And so, and also like ideas of like taking up space, like as a Black woman in a larger body. And how I've had issues with that in the past. Like one of my mentors in undergrad, she actually sat me down and was like, Ashanté, why do you make smaller work? Thinking it was gonna be like some conceptual, like, oh, I do this and this and that. And my answer was, I'm like, oh, I didn't want to take up space from anybody else. And I just said it because that's just what I believed about myself. And she was like, first of all, now your grade is gonna depend on you making larger work. And then on top of that, even I'm sorry if I made you feel like there wasn't space for you to take up. And just from that moment on, that really was kind of like, I don't know, some kind of light bulb moment for me. And starting to rethink about like how I saw myself, how I saw my work, and myself as a person, but an artist. And so now that's really come into the work. The largest piece I've made is like a 10-foot by 10-foot piece, a 10-foot by 10-foot all Black piece. And just thinking about like how this work is a representation of me, and having the ability to like really take up space in whatever configuration, even though I'm not here. And also like this work being a representation of a specific people, and them being able to take up space in like within like art and art history, Black people and our bodies have not always been shown in the best light. And especially as contemporary artists, we have the ability to change that history and rewrite it. And so I'm just doing my one little part by, you know, using my voice, being loud, taking up space, and yeah, just doing whatever. Yeah. I feel like you raised it. Oh, everybody raised it.
In the first room, those three works, the one in the center was lots of color, and then there was one that was almost completely white, and then one that was totally Black. What is the experience for you doing, say, that all Black painting versus the one that is like an explosion of color?
So I started out with all Black when I started painting. So I'm actually a photographer. I have no, like Khari's a painter's painter. I just kind of like, I just kind of was like, I had this vision and I was like, ended up at paint. I did all manual everything photography, so I knew how to use my hands. I ended up at paint and I was like, I know how highlights and shadows work. So Black glossy paint felt the safest to me. I'm like, I don't know anything about color theory, but then I was like, okay, Ashanté, that's not enough. Start doing the work. And so colors started to come in little by little, and learning different colors from him. Like, these are colors you mix together to make black. And then now to like the explosion of color. I feel like color has become a safe space for me, especially like during COVID. I always talk about my yellow couch. I bought a yellow couch, like these colorful furry stools. And I feel like usually like in my practice, now I do both at the same time, but I took a notice like, especially when COVID first happened, like I usually made the all black works when I was like feeling really good, and the colorful works came when I needed a balance. So it was kind of an opportunity for me to create a happiness that I kind of didn't feel. But now with the piece in the center in the front, now that was just kind of like, that piece was specifically about this space. And to be in this space surrounded by like, every time I've come here, I just feel so happy. And then I feel like this is the closest I'm ever gonna get to being like on the set of The Wiz. Because it was just kind of like, it's like you're on Earth, but you're not. And to like stand in the midst of somebody's wildest dreams, it just kind of like, I don't know, it's a good overwhelming, and I feel like that just really came out in that piece. So I'm like, any type of hair bow, all the colors, and literally my niece, like every color is my favorite thing. Like thinking about like hair adornments and how those are her favorite things. Like I did her first set of braids and beads, and now she thought every time she got her hair done, that was the style. And I'm like, honey, that takes a couple hours, and we can't do that all the time. But just even the joy of like children, like you get those like bows and things in your head, and how much better you feel about yourself, and really wanted to tap back into that kind of thing, and how unapologetic. My niece, clearly I talk about her a lot. She like, and just the way she exists really unapologetically. Even with asking for her compliments, if she's like, hey, don't I look nice today? And I'm like, yeah. And I feel like a lot of that energy is really in that work. So especially with those two next to each other, I feel like they're kind of one and the same. But a lot of these works, I think, have become sort of self-portraits of me. And then going back to Hippolyta, and it's like, which one? Like pick one, and it's like all of them. Like I like this whole like, do you want this or that? And I have a best friend, she's like, how about both? And so that's kind of where I am now, where it's like I'm this and that, or that too. I hope that answered your question. I just get so excited.
Of course, like being an artist, like you have the art side of things, right? And you also have the business side of it. For the two of you, do you consider or think about, how will this painting be received as far from a pricing standpoint, if you will, while painting or building, or I should say, or is that kind of not considered until after it's done and you're going to, kind of map out a pamphlet, if you will, of your art to actually done?
Yeah, I feel for me, I honestly feel like for both of us, like when making the work, we are artists because we have to be. We make work to, like, for me personally, I make work to live. And I feel like the moment an artist begins to make work specifically for the money, a collector's always gonna know. A gallerist is always gonna know. And they may not know right immediately, but they're gonna figure it out eventually. Leaving the whole thought of money makes more space for the passion to go into the work, and the work will always find its audience. So that's kind of for my thing. I don't think about that. The work will find its audience, and it may not find it immediately, but that's okay. As long as I feel good about it, I don't care. I make what I like, and whoever likes what I like is who the work is meant for. And everybody's not gonna like everything, so yeah, whatever.
Yeah, pretty much. It's pretty much. Because even before the work was selling, I kind of just made work because I knew that I'm trying to be like the greatest artist. I don't want to be like just some artist. So like, you know, I gotta put in the hours and the thought and the time to be able to even think that I want to be if considered the greatest. Just being a student athlete, like being an athlete always made you want to strive to be like, you know, mama mentality type. Like you want to keep wanting to go as good as possible. So like, I didn't care if the work sold, but people liked the work, and so the work did sell, and that freed me up even more, because once the work sold, and then once the work sold, and it was things that even I kind of questioned about, like, is this what I make now? Like, is this weird? And people were like, yeah, but I like it. Like, I was like, okay, I can make whatever I want. And I think that makes it so much better, because I feel like coming to this conclusion, I couldn't have done that if I was thinking about what other people were worried about or what other people liked. For me to be, you know, look at these paintings and go, oh, I made these with ocean water. There's no way I was gonna come to that if I was like, what's popping right now? What's really interesting for the collectors? And again, nostalgia sells, but like, you can't just sell nostalgia. Sooner or later, people are gonna not like that. And if you wanna be the greatest, you wanna have original ideas that are really expressing something and really challenging other people, because you usually remember a lot of things that you don't like more than the things that you do like. And if you question, even if you do like it, like, you know, what makes me like this is really something that ties people. So like, again, working and making work is always, I'm gonna just make the work, and then I'm gonna work with somebody else who figures out that part. Like, prices and all of that other stuff.
It has to be done.
Yes, with help.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, like, I imagine, you know, my work being like this, but also like, I can't sell all my paintings to my friends. That was the first thing that somebody told me, was like, you're not making paintings for your friends. They're not buying them. So it came down to like, you know, well, what do I want to make, regardless of whatever the price it comes to, what is really interesting, and how can I, you know, move on to the next thing. But yeah, no. So yeah, no.
I also want to comment on that as a curator. And one thing I really enjoyed working with both of you, you know, I love you both dearly. But also just like seeing how you react to making such site-specific work and seeing how passionate you both are was one of the best parts about curating the show. Like even having Ashanté come into the space, and afterwards I remember us talking, and she was like, I think I'm gonna add all these new materials. She's like, I'm a little scared. And I was like, just do it. Or like doing studio visits with Khari, and just like seeing the work in progress and seeing it grow was just, you know, it's so beautiful. And you can see that, you know, it's not about the money. It's not about, you know, even though y'all make money, but it's not about the money. It's about, you know, like the passion and like the excitement and the creating the work as genuinely as they can. And just as a curator, like they said, collectors and curators will know, like you can see when someone is just excited to make and inspired and passionate. It's just like, you can't fake that. You really can't.
No.
So, yeah, it's an honor.
Yeah. Plus, Chelsea is just great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just fantastic.
We love Chelsea.
Yeah, I was very taken by what you said about your figures. You have a lot of noses and mouths and hands, and you don't have eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And that was bothering me.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt to me, until you gave your explanation, like you were making the figures anonymous on purpose. And you also sometimes have a lot of squiggles over where the eyes would be.
Mm-hmm.
So I wondered if you could talk about that a little more. I know you were saying you didn't want us to be looking at the figure instead of feeling the ocean or feeling the water. But it just felt to me like you were, I don't know, that there was some quality of you were making them universal or anyway, I just wanted to ask you.
Yeah. No. So anybody who didn't hear the question, it was about the squiggles or the marks, and then no eyes in my work. So the no eyes I had mentioned earlier were a part of the way that I create work because it gives an animosity to the figure, but it also is important that people don't look at my paintings and go like they connect through the eyes. People usually say the eyes are the windows to the soul, and so people try to connect their souls through paintings of people through the eyes. So if you look at a painting, usually the first thing people notice, if it's not like a big painting you can't really see it without seeing the whole thing, is eyes. Even to the point where like people think about the eyes following them. And then none of my paintings have eyes, which is something because I can paint eyes. So obviously I'm not painting eyes. Like, it'd be funny if I couldn't paint eyes and I was like, all these noses and lips, I got it down, but the eyes I never got. No, which is crazy because hands are terribly hard to paint. People who paint like hands it's because of knuckles and wrinkles in hands. But no. So the eyes were originally a concept that I was working with at the beginning of undergrad because I was interested in the conversation between like thicker noses and thick lips and these facial features that are attributed to African American or black people in one way or another. But then after a while, that didn't really translate into anything specific anymore. It became an opportunity for me to be able to just open it up. Without no eyes, there is a way for it becomes universal and becomes anonymous. And the reason why I'm really interested in that is because, again, I'm making these works with ocean water. People died in that water, but essentially I don't know who died in that water. And there becomes a conversation of, can you fill the void of whatever that person could potentially look like? As well as the mark is another signature of my hand. Like the water I said is by itself. Like I pour it on and that is its own thing. But the mark is me as an artist back into the piece and brings both the paintings that are all the way mine and the me thrown on the water and then bringing that quick something to bring it all connected. Like even though I don't know what's in this water, or I don't know any type of specific person that this is, once the face is created and allow it to be ambiguous, that always still comes back to the fact that I painted it. And so like there's a mark to kind of bring it all together, as well as I was really interested in like this space of allowing the figure to also be anonymous in terms of identity. Like who are they? Are they gay, straight? Any of those things also are disconnected from the work. You don't have, like nobody even thinks about that as much when they see these people. But like people who are part of the LGBT community look at this and they're like, who is that? Is that person ambiguous? Like is this person, gender fluid? Because it's not a girl or a boy, it's just a shape. An outline, and it works really well in those different ways. And so I just wanted this to be open, because again, the thing about the paintings is like there's a way for this to connect to everybody. Like everybody again is a body of water. Everybody is made up of water. So like water connects everything. Without determinations to race or identity or anything like that, we're still made up of water. And so it always came down to like, as soon as and the thing is, I learned this too. Like the eyes, I didn't initially think too much about, other than the fact that I just wanted to have the nose and the lips. It was only after a long time and a lot of people looking at my works and questioning why I don't have eyes, where I really started to think about like, I'm glad I don't have them. And like really feeling like not having eyes makes the paintings, other than me like taking away eyes. Like there was never eyes added, so I can't take them away. They just weren't there. And it works out the best that way. And so, yeah, that's the reason why. The mark is to bring everything together, as well as because some people would see my paintings, and because I painted well, they thought like those were like stickers, or like I slapped those on somewhere, and like, oh no, this is a collage. And I'm like, no, I can still paint. And so like the mark was to bring everything back as like, this isn't just like a sticker, this is like moving material. And so that was one thing too. But yeah, nah, that's pretty much it.
But your work does have hands, and it seems almost all of your work has this dizzying movement, and movement until you come out to the hands.
Yeah.
And the hands are what sort of brings you, at least, into the painting. And
Yeah.
I wonder if that's sometimes it's the hands being more a thing of action, rather the eyes are just sort of maybe more looking or passive, and so your work really does, at least for me, has this action that always culminates in the hands.
Yeah. No, the hands were one of those things that at first I did the nose and the lips, and then I did hands in different colors, and I was like, I don't like this. As well as there's a sense of touch and liveliness that comes with the hands. Like without my nose and without my mouth, I can't breathe. I can't taste, I can't smell. There's like a lot of senses that are connected to this. And without those things, like you can't live. And so I thought about this idea of touch, as well as, oh, that's what I wanted to say. I wanted to say also, a lot of the reason that these paintings look this way is because I grew up in a single mother household. I don't know my father, never met my father. I kind of somewhat know what he looks like because I found his Facebook one time. But I have no idea who he is. And so I used to paint pictures of full figure people, everything, the whole face, it made everything. And I didn't like it. I was like, there's something else to this. And I realized that I didn't know a lot about myself. I didn't know a lot about my identity. And so the things that I painted shouldn't be full fleshed out figures. They should be a way to be abstract and to be themselves, but to also be something completely different. And that's not to say that they aren't the same thing, but they are fleshed out because, you know, they're still people. In the same way that I don't really know that side of my family or anything about him, but I know who I am as a person. And with the hands, it became another conversation around touch. And like, what does working hard mean? And hands are usually always like a symbol of working hard. Like if you have callus on your hands, you know you're doing something, like a job is like aggressive. And there's like parts, and a lot of the hands aren't even all the way fleshed out. Like it'll just be like 2 fingers and then one side of the hand and another finger or another side of the hand. Or the hands will be like really kind of like thrown together in one way or another. And I think just hands are just interesting in terms of like that sense of touch. So like I get everything except for sight. And so it's like, what do you see when you look at these paintings?
Dreams, your hands are probably the clearest part of the whole
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, no, and I think that touch is like super important. I'm also a big person on touch. Like it's just a thing. Like I'm a hugger. But but yeah. Any last questions?
With the bike piece,
Yeah.
I really got the sense of like our kids around here.
Yeah.
And like that sense of abandon for like the rules.
Yeah.
And the rebellious nature, like it. And you said there is no sunset like that, but if you hit the Parkway, that sunset exists.
Yeah.
When the sun's going down around there, it's like just pure orange, probably pollution, but it's beautiful.
I've heard of that.
It'll cast you in a glow.
Yeah.
Seriously. So I really love that piece, and even the way the stripe elongates itself, it feels like the speed that they create.
Yeah. That was a big thing
I'm
too.
nervous for them, but they do not care.
Nah.
So I really thoroughly love that piece.
Yeah. No. Riding bikes was always like a part of just growing up in adolescence. It's like, I'm not coming home until the lights go off. Then you better get.
Really captured that.
Oh, yeah. All right.
All right.
Thank y'all.
Do like Whitney Houston.
Thank y'all for
Thank you for coming.
Special thank you to Khari and Ashanté for sharing so much about you.
Oh my gosh. Thank y'all.